Buongiorno, mi sentite tutti? Sì? Okay. So good morning. I will speak in English because we have artists coming from all over the world, so it's gonna be in English. I hope it's fine for everyone. So first of all, thank you for coming here, and a big thank you to the 4 artists who made themselves available to be in Milan with us. We have Wylda Bayron, Grégoire Eloy, Christopher Thomas, and Gabriele Galimberti. Today we are starting our first masterclass about reportage, which is obviously linked to the reportage section here at the fair, the reportage beyond reportage, where the photographs of each one of the artists here at the table are shown together with many other artists that are part of the section. So today with the 4 artists, I would like to talk about the development of reportage and the value of reportage, and how actually the way of doing reportage changed over the years. If we all think about reportage, I believe everyone immediately will think about the historical photos by Cartier-Bresson, Robert Capa. The first example of reportage is actually dated very far away, back to 19th century in 1848, when Charles-François Thibault took the first reportage picture of the barricades in Paris. And the first example of war reportage was a few years later about the Crimean War by Roger Fenton. So when we think about reportage, I think we immediately link the word reportage as an illustration of a text, of a news, of a story. And today I believe reportage photography became itself a story. So it changed in a way. And on this topic I would like to dwell a little bit more in detail with the artists that are here. You all come from different countries, life experience, work, different technique, but I believe you all share the same goal, that you want to be witnesses of a story, of an event, of a moment that will become forever imprinted in our memory and will allow us to remember forever. You actually all present very intense and courageous stories. If I'm thinking about the work by Grégoire about the effect of climate change, climate crisis, the work by Wylda that is aimed to preserve the faraway communities and the people and tribes, the work by Christopher that is focused on discovering a new identity of places, of cities, of locations, and the work by Gabriele that is dealing with social issues. So what is interesting again is also the fact that you all have an honest approach, an impartial approach where there is no judgment, there is only pure testimony. At the same time, we know that photographs are, let's say, a personal interpretation of the word. From the technique that is used for recording light, and here I'm thinking of the work by Christopher, to the selection of a very precise time and location in the work by both Grégoire and Wylda, and the framing of a specific subject or a specific situation set up in Gabriele. So photography at the end is a deliberate construction and a medium of representation done subjectively and open to different interpretation. So I believe this is a very important aspect linked to the development of reportage in the years and to the way reportage is interpreted both by the photographers and by us, by the public. So now I would like to pass the floor to each one of you. I will make a brief introduction to the work of each of the artists, and then finally they can talk about their work. So we'll start with Wylda Bayron. Wylda was born in Puerto Rico. She lives in New York. She works anywhere and loves travel and tribes. And I'm quoting here her short bio resume on her website. Wylda is not only a photographer, she's also a director of photography in cinematographic and television creation. She started her career in 2002. She was the first assistant camera woman on the American series Miracles Boys by Spike Lee. She was director of photography for Oprah Winfrey, Cyndi Lauper, Ben Stiller, Ryan Murphy, just to name a few. As a photographer, Wylda has spent more than a decade traveling to the most remote locations on the planet, taking photos on all continents, except Antarctica, if I'm not wrong. In her photographic work, she focused on culture and cultural identity, adventure and human relationships. And now I would like to focus on her experience in Papua New Guinea. Wylda spent almost 2 years traveling through this region to meet tribal societies. She has been very well welcomed by the local people, being able to attend their gatherings and secret rites from which normally foreigners are excluded. So she has been lucky in a way. But besides photography, Wylda is interested in anthropology and ethnography. She wanted to discover and learn more about faraway culture. And now I'm really curious to hear from you, Wylda, what is the reason that brought you to Papua New Guinea from Puerto Rico and made important observations between your own native country and Papua New Guinea? At the beginning of your journey, you faced a tough decision. Should you risk your life by attempting to complete your project or return to New York City? And then you said, I knew that getting on a plane and leaving would have been a big failure or a big letdown. I needed to stay.
Thank you, Emanuela, for the introduction and for everyone to spend some time here with us. I am from Puerto Rico, and I'm very fortunate to have 2 great lives. As a cinematographer, I work with Cyndi Lauper and all these great people, and then I leave that all behind for 2 years at a time to seek the real truth, which lies on the tribes and the pure cultural identity. My work in New Guinea was very spontaneous. I went for 2 months initially, and very immediately there were certain circumstances that propelled me to find safety and in order to continue my time there. I was very lucky in the first week. I was able to meet a local family that took me in and allowed me to be able to do the work through something that Papua New Guinea has called the One Talk system. There are 750 languages and tribes in New Guinea, and One Talk means one language, and if you have a One Talk, they are supposed to care for you and protect you. So in order to travel to the 22 provinces, I was able to go with new family members and be indoctrinated into their cultures. And the proposition was very simple. Who are you, and what do you want the world to know about you? We would organize, when I would arrive to certain villages, they already knew the project, and they would organize the cultural curation, essentially. So everything that you see in the photographs, they created themselves, and they were in charge of being correctly showing themselves. My job was simply to take the photographs and travel with the stories so I can share them with you. So it was very much a collaboration, and I think you can see the joy and the presence of the images because they wanted this to happen. So that's kind of how it happened, very spontaneously. I spent 1.5 years first, but after New Guinea, the first 1.5 years, I never traveled anywhere else for the last 10 years. I traveled 30 countries prior to New Guinea, and after New Guinea, it just exclusively became the focus of the project, because I knew that if I left, the cultural identities would be dying off. The materials are no longer being used the way they were being used in the past. So the project propelled itself to also teach them that preservation is important. And I think we achieved that, including some rights that had died off until I went to inquire, and then they came back to life because just a simple proposition, why did you let it go? You know, so it's been a very rewarding project.
Thank you, Wylda. Thank you very much. I think now we can talk about Grégoire. So Grégoire is a French photographer based in Paris. He's engaged since 2003 in an author's documentary photographic practice. His work as a photo reporter, he started working as assistant of Stanley Green, an American photojournalist, took him for 10 years from the countries of Eastern Europe to Central Asia for long-term projects on the Soviet heritage and the wars of the South Caucasus. From 2010, he began a new cycle of work, collaborating with a scientific community, astrophysicists, geologists, glaciologists, geophysicists, investigating the science of matter with a focus on 3 topics: the dark matter, the seismological fault here in Italy in Balmuccia in Piemonte, and the monitoring of Ossù, one of the last glaciers in the Pyrenees, and is a series that is exhibited here at Eco Gallery. And is also the project with which Grégoire won the Nietzsche Prize in 2021. So Grégoire, for you, the relationship with the natural environment is very important. Once you declared that the relationship to nature is a mechanism close to religion, deeply intimate. It is therefore up to everyone to make their own experience. By reconnecting with this wild nature in my photographic work, I encourage everyone to think about it without proselytizing. I would like to ask you, Grégoire, to describe in more detail how your career as a photographer has evolved from 2003 to today, and how much your relationship with nature has influenced your work's method.
Thank you. That's a long question. I started as a documentary photographer, very straight documentary photographer, social photography, and documenting life of people in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. And obviously working with Stanley, working in the Caucasus, focusing on post-war situations. So that took me about 10 years. After which I started to work with the scientific community, and this is where my focus shifted. Not that I wasn't interested in the life of people anymore. It was just about the fact that, it was more the fact that I was getting concerned about the environment, like we all are, and instead of taking an outside view of the environment, I thought I should probably experiment it by myself. And the photography would come as a secondary product or an outcome of that experiment. So for the past 10 years, my projects are all about experimenting environments. Could be a forest, could be a mountain, a glacier, and even the seawater. So or walks, for example, the project which is shown, and you can turn the images, is one of the latest. I've been working with glaciologists that do work by actually going to the mountain, climbing at all weathers, at all time frame, seasons, and everything. So you have to go with them in the mountain to get familiar with the place, familiar with the glacier. In the case of the Glacier d'Ossù, how can we make it turn? Should I myself? Yes. How did you do it? You're so good. You didn't do nothing. Yeah. Okay, I go like this. So the first thing was to. So I have to click every time. Okay. Yeah, because I'm gonna. I don't want to talk too much about that specific project because it could be just an hour just talking about this. It's basically, in a few words, it's looking at a glacier at all scales. Time-wise, because that's what glaciologists do. They look at the glacier at all time scales. Very old pictures, like the one we saw just before, and pictures they still make to see how the glacier evolves. And also they work with satellite, which is the first image or so. They use satellite images to look at the height of the glaciers, and they do that on this glacier, but everywhere in the world as well. And the last thing is also they look at the density of the snow, whether it's going to become ice or not. So they look at the matter itself. So it's really about ice and glacier and the mountain at all scales. That's for this specific project. The idea to work with the scientists is to shift the way you look at things, to find a new way, a new angle. You were mentioning Cartier-Bresson. I'm French, so I come from that school of photography, which is Cartier-Bresson, unavoidable. And Cartier-Bresson, he didn't want to crop his pictures. He wanted to have always like the black border to show that his framing was perfect. So first you're trying to do this, you're trying to do it perfectly, and you're trying to be Stanley Green. And then you move away from that, and you feel like photography could be also a way to obtain freedom, to be free, to do things differently, to experiment things yourself. And ever since I've started to work with the scientists, it really has changed the way I'm doing photography. So I'm trying many different things. Could be digital, could be analog, using other people's pictures, going myself into the landscape. So the human presence disappears, and it's more about me getting into these places. And I'm just going to finish on one thing is, why did I say that? It's even if I said that, it's kind of I don't know where you get this from, but it's kind of a religion. It's probably a strong word, but it's to say that instead of showing how bad the situation is, you want to push people to go and see it by themselves, and not that the situation is going to be terrible. If you go up in the mountain in the Pyrenees, you're going to find a beautiful landscape, beautiful glaciers. It's just to get more intimacy, to get more complicity, intimacy with the landscape. Once you know someone better, you take care of that person. You could do the same with environment. If you know a forest better, if you go by night inside the forest, you know the forest better, and you take care of the forest better. That's why it comes back to that sense, which is basically experiment things by myself to take care more after I've experienced. Is that short or long or good enough? Okay, good.
Thank you, Grégoire. Christopher Thomas is a German-based photographer who began his career as an advertiser for different German magazines as Stern, Merian, Geo. He has received a number of international awards, such as the World Press Award and the Epic Award in 1995. In recent years, he has concentrated on creating portraits of cities as Munich, New York, Paris, Venice, the Engadine, and LA. Christopher uses Polaroid film and long exposure technique for his ongoing series. Parallel to this series, in 2010, he photographed amateur actors and actresses during the rehearsal for the Passion Play in Bavaria. The result was a series of 56 portraits, reminiscent of paintings by old masters. Here at MIA, Christopher is presenting at Ira Steinman Gallery a selection of the Bittersweet series from 2000 to 2020, taken in multiple locations around the world, from a Discover bar in Texas to a fairground ride near the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine. What struck me the most in your city's portraits and Bittersweet series is the absence of the human figure. You photograph cities or places that are normally full of life, of humanity, but in your shots, the result is more similar to a still life, if I may use this word. Like a moment of break from the frenzy, in these silent and nostalgic photos, you grasp the essence of the city, the hidden soul of the place. You give a new identity to each place. At the same time, you have produced numerous series dedicated to human figure, to women, orphans, sick people, where all the poignant power of the portrait emerges. I would like to explore the theme of portrait with you. For me, your photos, as I said, are like a form of still life inside the documentary photography frame. How do you relate yourself to documentary photography, where the aim is to remove the superfluous, capture real-life situations, and bring hidden realities to light?
Thank you. For me, my life as a photographer, my career as a photographer is basically, it's two parts. When I finished photography school, I would like to do these.
Do it in
Yeah?
loop, right? Or
Yeah?
do you want to do it
No, I would do it because then I can speak to it. I just make a quick intro and then I can use that as a reference. Anyways, I started out as a photographer for magazines, and I did fashion and eventually and advertising a lot, and eventually I got into car shoots, and the assignments got bigger and bigger, and more people were on a shoot, and I've had the feeling that I always got further and further away from the photography, the reason why I became a photographer. Eventually a material, what you just mentioned, the Polaroid, type 55, that's a large format Polaroid, you all know it, with a negative, with a black and white negative, and I always loved that material, and we only used it in the advertising, in the car shoots as a reference to discuss with the client, and then shoot a slide and throw away the Polaroid, and I found that so sad. Plus the fact that I wanted to go back to photography, just being by myself and a camera and not being pushed around by everybody. So I started that parallel just for myself, and eventually a magazine that I was working for asked me if they could show a series, and the rest is history. I show it in a moment. So I started out, they showed a series about my hometown, Munich, and I also lived in New York, and I did that, and so Munich became then a book, and then New York, and then other cities, and then I kept on doing other stuff, and now I'm totally out of advertising, fortunately, even though it paid for a long time, it paid my free work, and now I've transcended to the other side. By the way, reportage, what you just said, I think reportage is basically, and that's why I have so many different things in this portfolio, is basically if you go out with the camera out of the studio, everything is reportage because you always relate to the outside, and even in the studio, as soon as you shoot something that is that's a product or a person, is always a reportage of your time. Maybe if you're totally abstract, then it's not. So I might just quickly go through these. So this is New York, and as you say, oh yeah, by the way, what you just said is the absence of people. A quick intro. Oh, now it's going on again. What do I do? How do I? But it's going on. Okay. Now it stopped. Okay. I tested a camera, a Linhof camera, with a Polaroid next to my studio, and it was very low light, and I had to use a very long exposure, and I found it so beautiful. So I said, why? It's so sad. The cities nowadays are on, and the books about cities are so. It's always so crowded and messy, and I wanted to go back to the old style that 100 years ago. Why do they look so peaceful? And it is because the photographers at that time, they were forced to use long exposures 150 years ago. And obviously there were people and carriages and everything in the pictures, but if they exposed for 10 or longer minutes, the people were gone. And that's what I used in these city portraits too. Often in these images, there's people walking through, but you don't see them because I exposed for half an hour or so. So that's Wall Street. Everybody knows this one. Colgate clock, view upon New York. Your town? Yeah, exactly. I copied him. And the border is always the Polaroid material that you see. I always left it on, like you, or Cartier-Bresson. Venice, so we're now here. Very seldom with snow. It's very funny if when you see people walking there, because there's lines of marble, and people don't see that, and everybody slips there, so they push it away very fast. There you see the long exposure. That's snow on the gondolier, and because the cover is dark. So it was actually these are were very nice projects, which I still did parallel to the assigned work, to the advertising work, and I always got myself an apartment. So I had a nice rooftop apartment in Venice for 1.5 years, and in between the car shoots, I went to Venice and did that. So I had an excuse to get away. There's a lot of people in this picture. You don't see it. Sometimes you have to use very bad weather, so people don't sit somewhere or stand. So they take a selfie and then they go. So that's why you don't see them. That's. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's at the booth there, and there you can see a couple, and the material. Every single shot is unique, because sometimes the chemistry doesn't really run over the picture properly, and the frames are always this created by the chemistry of them. That's Munich. You wanted to say something?
These are actual Polaroids, or they are the prints made out of the negative of the Polaroid?
Exactly, prints out of the negative. Okay. But I have the originals too.
Okay. And you're selling the originals, or you're selling the prints made out of the...
Well, I don't sell at all, but Ira does, and yes, okay. She also... the funny thing is, I always threw away them, so I don't have any... I think I don't have any positives of... Munich maybe or something. Eventually she saw them stuck together in a carton because I just used the negatives, and she said, "Are you crazy?" So I didn't think about that. Anyway, so that's the Bavaria in Munich. That's also Munich. It was the cover of the book. It's Angel of Peace, and typical. One of our hundreds of beer gardens, and a lake next to Munich. That was the last book of the city portraits, Los Angeles, Googie architecture. Yeah. Yeah? Okay. We compare. Yeah. Okay. that was really hard to get without cars because there's always someone parked, and at night you can spend many nights there to get.
It's always half an hour exposure time, or
No. It's sometimes make it very short just to get a gap,
Okay.
but sometimes you have to make it a long time because you never get people out.
Yeah, exactly.
Paris is really hard. Venice is really hard. That's here at the ERS booth, yes. So sometimes I have people in it, and mouses. So that's from the series Bittersweet. That was my most recent series. It developed out of two series. One was the beginning of our life, and the other one, the end of our life. The bliss that you feel as a child when you see a carousel or a chewing gum machine, and then Transitions was the other one, the end of our life, and I merged them together to the series Bittersweet, and the book. All these series I did books with, usually. That's in Chernobyl. Pripyat, yeah, exactly. Salton Sea. Lago di Garda. So that's the this was a series. It's called Passion. It's a play in southern Germany about the Passion of Christ, and actually I just did a portrait of the director of the play, and then he asked me to do this, and it became it took a totally different path, and now it's been shown in different museums. At the last year, it was in German Bundestag, the German Parliament. They have a art collection, and so it's also kind of a reportage, of course. How the people from the Germans from the 21st century become these biblical figures. They're not allowed to shave and cut their hair a year before the play. They do that every 10 years. And then I did a series about. I went a couple of times with help organizations. That was still during my advertising time, as a balance to the advertising world, to do something that made a little bit more sense to me. And it was a series about. I went there a couple of times to Ethiopia and to India and Nepal, taking portraits of people with leprosy. That stems from my childhood, because I always saw, and the reportages that I saw were always about how terrible the disease is, and how disfigured the people are, and how good or about the help organizations. But I've never got any person with leprosy to talk about what their dreams are, how they see their life, how they got it to get that far until you lose your fingers and toes, and that takes decades. And so we just put a chair on a white background, and I had a friend of mine. He did the questioning of the people, and we asked them a couple of questions, and I came back with the pictures, and the art director of the magazine said, well, they don't really touch me very much, these pictures. I thought you go closer to the wounds. And I said, oh, okay, you don't, then you don't have to take it. And then someone else took it. I got some awards, and then he said, I think I made a mistake, and can you go again and do it again? So we did that again. And what I wanted to do is also that that these people, they're very, very happy because they have a second life. Where when you in Nepal, and I think it's still that way, when you got leprosy, your life is over. You get kicked out of your village, and you have to beg in front of temples. I don't know if it's now still that way. It was 20 years ago, but. And it was a campaign for the biggest leprosy help and tuberculosis help organization in the world, and I wanted it to be a positive one, not always a too tragic one. It's not all of them, of course, but he is. And there was a terrible series about girls and women being burnt, dowry burns in India and Bangladesh. It's a terrible habit that, or it's how do you say, the dowry topic basically is a good one, that the girl gets money from her parents into the new family, but and it got totally out of hand, and they use the girls or the women to push to press money out of the families, and if it's not possible anymore, then they burn them because it can be disguised as a accident, and girls cost money, and the official numbers are one woman per hour is being burnt in India, and I think the unofficial ones is 10 times higher, and often they don't get. And I went with female doctors. They plastic surgeons who only operate on women, and there's a terrible story to, especially this one, but to many of them. And I was an art student. She got burnt by her aunt because she wanted her to prostitute herself. Okay, we would if we would be operated in there, we would not survive that, I think. And to end with a bit of a more positive mood is that was the first book I did, where my agent then at advertising said I need a portfolio, do a portfolio, and I got drifted away, and I just did a book. I heard this song of Baz Luhrmann, wear sunscreen, and I just took those phrases and made with pictures that I had in a shoebox. I made this book, or from reportages. That's it.
Thank you. That was a lot. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello? Yes. So Gabriele is an Italian photographer based in Milan who spends most of his time traveling and working on assignments for international magazines and newspapers as National Geographic, Sunday Times, Stern, Le Monde, La Repubblica, and working on long-term documentary photography projects, some of which have become books as Toy Stories, In Her Kitchen, My Couch is Your Couch, and Heavens. He committed to documentary photography after starting as a commercial photographer. He won the World Press Photo in 2021 in the Portrait Stories category with this project, The Americans. One photo is shown here at the OTM booth. Throughout his photos, Gabriele wants to tell us stories about people around the globe, capturing their identities through the images of things that are proud of and the belongings with which they surround themselves. Here at OTM, he is presenting two series, The Americans and Toy Stories, both portraits of people. In the first one, he went all around US to immortalize gun owners and their weapons in their homes or neighborhoods, even in places where no one would expect to find such arsenals. For the second series, Gabriele, you spent 2 years traveling over 50 countries, from Iceland to Morocco, Japan, Fiji, Bolivia, Australia, Alaska, South Africa, and you photographed boys and girls between 3 and 6 years old in their homes with their toys. I have noticed that only 2 boys you have shown toy weapons, both age 5, one from Ukraine and the other one from China. On the contrary, I would have imagined that it would have been children from US who showed toy weapons. And focusing on this topic relating to the unresolved problem of possession of weapons in the US, I would like to ask you 2 questions. The first one is that clearly you built a scene of your photographs. Normally it can take up to 9 hours to set up. Even 2 days. Even 2 days to set up the scene. And you agreed with people, you got their consent, and in a certain way you have recreated a visual stereotype, and of course I'm referring especially to Americans. So how do you think photography practices can challenge stereotypes? The second question is about US. So American citizens live with the acceptance of the Second Amendment, and it doesn't seem that they want to change their minds about it. How do you think irrecoverable is the issue after all?
Wow, I was not ready for these 2 questions. But should I answer now or at the end of the presentation? Because people haven't seen the photos.
If you want to start with the presentation and then you can answer.
Because you know the Americans is the last part of my presentation, so maybe I can answer at the end. But because what I prepared today is basically a presentation of my signature style, because I take many kind of photos. As you said, I worked a lot in documentary, a lot in advertising, so I do many things. But there's one kind of photos that I do regularly, and it's actually taking photos of people and objects or things. And everything started with this picture here. This is my grandmother. And I took this picture like 15 years ago, more or less, when I started to travel all over the planet. So it's been, 2 decades that I travel almost non-stop. And my grandmother was always worried about the food that I eat all over the planet. So she was always scared of me going in Africa or in China. Yeah, she is an Italian grandmother. And so one day I said to my grandma that I would go and eat at grandmother's places all over the planet because they know how to take care of children and grandnephews and whatever. So, and basically, I needed to find a simple way to photograph and show to my grandmother like a simple language, something that she could understand immediately. And so I photographed all over the planet grandmothers with all the ingredients that they uses for cook, and then the final dish. And I made a combination of the 2 photos. So on one side you see the lady with exactly the ingredients that she needs for the recipe. Then you see the final dish, including iguana or whatever weird thing I could find all over the planet. And so I photographed for a few years, more or less 50 plus grandmothers from 50 plus places. And then I made a book, and I started this photo language, I told you, because I need something to show to my grandma, and she needed to understand what I was doing. And I was sending these photos to my grandma almost every week, you know, to say, I'm alive, I'm eating well, look at the photos. And at the end of the, after a few years of traveling, I made a book collecting all the photos and all the recipes, because I always write the recipe and I write the story of the grandma. And it's funny because this is out of the 10 books that I made, this is my biggest success. And it's a cookbook, it's not a photo book. And it's been translated in 14 languages. Some TV channels invited me for shows to cook and pretending I'm a chef, but I said, I'm a photographer. But they said, oh, come over, you know how to cook, you learned. And anyway, so this is the first time that I used my style of, photographing people and objects. But then I made other stories with the same language. This is Toy Stories that you were talking about before, and it's shown at the OTM gallery. And all the stories that I'm showing today are things that happened by chance to me. It's not something that I previously thought, oh, I'm gonna make a project on children and toys. And this one happened because a friend of mine, more than 10 years ago, called me and said, can you come here and take some photos of my daughter? So I went at her place, and she was organizing her toys or playing, and so I said, okay, I took this picture, and then I decided to do the same thing everywhere. So the first one was in Italy, this is in New York, and you can see, Alaska, Zanzibar, Mexico, China, Japan, Sweden, Fiji, Mexico again, California, I don't remember everyone, but Australia, Texas, Malaysia, and so on. And again, it became a book that is a collection of more than 50 photos. And I'm still taking photos with this, for this project, because that was almost 10 years ago, and I'm planning to make chapter 2, so maybe. And then this style became also something that magazines started to call me for stories. And I'm showing now something that I did for National Geographic a few years ago. They were preparing a number completely dedicated to health issue. And so they called me and they said, can you do your style and photograph families with all the medicines they have in the house? And so I traveled for a few months, and I went to more or less 10, 15 countries, and I photographed, families with all the medicines they have in the house. This one is in Switzerland, quite a lot. Quite a lot. And so that was one of the few things that I made for National Geographic. But as I told you, I don't take only photos of people and things. I do many other things. For example, I made a story about the 500th anniversary of Leonardo da Vinci. And then I also made a story about dinosaurs and fossils. And when I was in the US taking photos of fossils and people that buy and collects dinosaurs, I got in touch with this guy that together with the dinosaurs, he had also more than 50 guns. And by chance, I said, oh, can I take a picture of you or your collection? And he said, oh, why not? And so I used, again, my style to take this picture. And so this was the first one that I took for Americans, the project Americans. And then I decided to try to see if this guy was just a weird guy or if it's normal to see something like this in the US, and I discovered that it's actually normal. So I went all across the US, more or less 35 different states, from New York till Hawaii, and I basically knocked at people's doors and say, do you have guns in your house? Of course I have. How many? 150. And can I see? And it was fun and weird to discover that they are so proud to show what they have, including five flamethrowers. And so the first one was in Kansas, the second one in Texas, this is Louisiana, and then you have Arizona, Pennsylvania, Alabama, Kansas again, and everywhere, Florida, Indiana, Mississippi, California, and so on. This is in Las Vegas. No one. Luckily, thankfully. Even if, most of the guns were loaded, because I was moving the guns around, and most of the time these guys say, oh, be careful with that one is loaded. Fuck. Huh? Anyway, so, and this one is in Arizona. She's 16, and her father was really proud to tell me that at the age of 18 she would become owner of everything. So she's now owner of everything because this photo was taken 3 years ago. And this is the last one I'm showing today, and it's also the cover of the book. For example, for this picture here, I needed 2 days. Because I decided to design the border of the United States with 119 guns that this guy has in the house. So, and to answer your question, which I forgot, which was?
Maybe we can start with the second one, which was if you think that the problem is unresolvable.
Yeah, I think if, let's say, we are saying that they have a problem with guns, because they don't think they have a problem with guns. So, but let's pretend they have a problem with guns. I don't think they will solve it soon, because it's actually going worse and worse year after year, especially recently. And because I think that it's not just a matter of law or legislation, it's really something that now is in the DNA of Americans. It's part of the identity of being American, somehow. Not, of course, not everyone. It's 50% of the population owns guns. But if you think that there are more guns than people, so there are like 400 millions of guns registered, but they are 325 millions, more or less. So it's 1.4 per person. But that's only registered guns and only private guns. If you count everything, they have 48% of guns of the planet, but they are 4% of the global population. So the numbers are kind of not balanced. Yeah, that's it.
Problem to solve. Anna. Okay, so I think we had a very great panorama view on the works of the 4 artists that are here. I would like to know if you have any question to rise up to all of them, one of them. If there are questions, don't hesitate. Thanks.
Hi. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much. I was wondering if the concept of real and reality, it's something different in your works, and how you would think in order to show that difference, in case there is.
The question is for everyone, let's say.
Of course, it is.
Of course.
I have a question about the guns, but I can do later.
Who wants to answer first?
It's a good question, because every time you click the shutter, there is that we've made decisions about color, composition, what we leave in, what we leave out, particularly in my project, which is, it aims to be a preservation project. It was very challenging. Do I leave the rubber band? Do I leave the modern components? So at some point, we show the rubber bands and the reality of 2014, 2020, and at some points we remove. And when I remove things, what I try to do is I show them in black and white in a way that it's more classic, just to differentiate and give it a historical component. And when I show them in full color, like you will see down in the 193 gallery booth, they might have modern components so that you show the reality of that moment when we decided to take that photo. So it's always a balance of, it's always an act. It's always a mirage. There's no true documentary. Because we've made the decision of the time and place and what we leave in and what we leave out, and our expression of who we are, I think, is also blended in each photo. So it'll never be real, but hopefully it feels real when the viewer sees it and has a connection, and take that experience with them of who the people are, the spaces and the places that are captured, and that we will die, we will not be here. And the beauty of what we have accomplished is that generations will be able to enjoy the people of New Guinea, the glaciers, the history of America, and the beautiful places of New York City, etc., that we have all captured here. So.
Yeah, I think just to add to what you said is it's a big issue with photography. It's not the same, obviously, with paintings, because painting is obviously paint, right? So it's not reality. It's just a vision of reality. With the images, with the photography, you think it's reality because it's real in the picture. But as you said, as soon as you decide to frame, you decide to do color, black and white, whatever, it is not. It's a distorted version of the reality. So it would be probably better for everyone's sake that to, especially the public, that to know that a picture is not reality. It's just one reality out of many different. Even photojournalism is known as being hardcore reality, but it's a decision of the photographer in the first place. So for me, it's not even a question whether I want to make it real or not. I want to have my experiments or the way I do things as real as possible, and then the pictures tell whatever they tell. It's something else than the reality I see or the reality I live.
Yeah, it's the interpretation of this one person onto the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything they said. There's not much to add.
No choice.
I mean, I can speak about my projects and the way I photograph. And the way I photograph, I think it's so clear that I'm there moving things, that what you see is somehow real because I use real things, real stories, real objects, but it's not reality because no one wants to go out with 50 guns in the street, and so it's clear that I'm using reality the real things to create my vision of reality. And
I mean, if you would take, for example, an example of a picture at war, what's reality? Is the body laying on the floor, dead, with the blood and whatever is around him or her, or is to take a wider shot of the same person with all the photographers around him or her taking these pictures, or even a wider shot where you have the cars waiting, the fixers, the whatever, and then taking, I mean, it's endless. So it's just a matter of, it's really for the public to understand that it's just one reality. I mean, there's this project by Jonas Bendixson, who made a real project about a real town working on fakes, mainly computer people doing fakes and drowning the internet with fakes. And he made portraits, he made landscapes and everything, and he's a magnum photographer, a very well-known, famous documentary photographer, and everything was fake. Everything was made up by the computer. No one was real, not even one person. It looks really like documentary photography, but it's all digital, it's all computer work, which is an issue. I mean, we could talk about that because he was coming from the truly photojournalism angle, and he didn't say in the first place, obviously, he wanted to tweak and he wanted to make the test. So yeah, it's a tough question for photography.
Do you have a second question?
As I've seen many guns come on in just one place, do you think, I mean, based on your experience, are they there to provide guns to friends and family around them, or they are there just in order to exhibit a sense of, I don't know, power for themselves only?
it's
Just a curiosity.
yeah. It's both things. It depends on the subject. I photographed 50 families and 50 different subjects. And each one of them gave me a different reason why they have so many guns. So it's difficult for me to say it's one or the other of the two options, but of course both of them are present there. The first time they buy a gun, it's maybe for self-protection, or because they hunt, or because they like to go at the shooting range and have fun. So these are the three reasons. But the main one is actually self-protection and to feel that you have power to protect yourself and your family and your house, your property, and so on. But from the first one they buy and going till the 200 they buy, there are many things happening in the middle in their minds, and so some of them are collectors, some others are just, you know, they are scared of something huge happening soon, and they have to have a bazooka. I photographed people with bazookas, so it's not only guns, it's war guns, war weapons. So the reasons why they have so many, it's many reasons. Mm.
Hi, thanks for sharing your stories. It was very inspiring. I wanted to ask Christopher, why did you took the photos on Polaroid if you are printing them like normal photos? It might be a stupid question, I'm sorry. But why using Polaroid? And how do you manage to, why is it so special about Polaroid that you used it, and after that you somehow treated them like film or normal photos, I don't know.
Well, Polaroid was a company who made very different film materials, and the one that I used, it's over, was a classical black and white negative. Ansel Adams already used it and made prints from it. You can put it in an enlarger and print from it, like from another negative that you developed in a different chemistry. So you can treat it as a negative, or it is one. And I first printed it in a classical way with an enlarger. But the quality got better when you scan it and print it because you don't have a 2 times 1 lens technique. So that's why.
No, actually, why did you shoot on Polaroid that project? Why didn't you just shoot on film or on digital? Why is it so special for you, Polaroid?
Because the material has this life and this and the accidents it has, and especially with the frame, with the chemistry running every single time differently around the frame. It's not so to say. A Polaroid is more painterly than a classical black and white film, which was always very straight, and the Polaroid had more movement. That's why I loved it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
I believe if you go and see his prints at the standard book, you can really feel the difference of printing a Polaroid, especially because Christopher is using this special paper, which is like the result is like a watercolor.
Yes. And if you look at the books, she also has the books. You will see in the books that on each page you can see if you just look at the edges, there's a lot of mistakes happening. Actually, in Paris, I made a mistake with I took a picture of Place de la Concorde, I think, and then the Conciergerie, and I accidentally shot on the same negative again, and the chemistry was already a little spoiled, and then it has bubbles and everything. And I said, okay, I take this into the book, even if it's not a big information, just because it's fun.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? No? So I thank you very much, the 4 of you, for this wonderful masterclass roundtable. And I just invite everyone, if you just arrived to the fair, to, of course, visit all the booths. But I would like just to list you the 13 galleries that are part of the reportage section, where you can find the work of many other artists. that I couldn't invite, of course, here because we have only 1 hour. But here I see two artists that are already present, Keila Aguilarte and Carlo Bevilacqua, and they're both shown at the Talula Studio booth. Then you can visit Gallery 193, where the work of Wylda is shown, Arco Gallery, Valeria Bella, Alberto Damian, Eco, where is shown the work by Grégoire, Christopher Guy, Le Reverber, Nine Fish, that it's an Indian gallery, OTM, where the work by Gabriele shown, Podbleski, Ira Steman, where is Christopher, and To Be from Budapest. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the fair. Thank you.
Thank you.